around 1150 BCE, the Jezreel Valley, northern Canaan. On one side stands Sisera, commander of the armies of King Jabin of Hazor, 900 chariots fitted with iron, backed by infantry gathered from garrison towns across Canaanite territory, operating out of a base called Harosheth Hagoyim. On the other side stands a temporary alliance of Israelite tribes that has not fought together as one force in a generation. Roughly 10,000 men, drawn mainly from Zebulun and Naphtali, led by a judge named Deborah and a commander named Barak. Hazor is not a minor power. It is, by the standards of the region, the most significant city in Canaan, controlling routes that run north toward Syria and south through the rest of the country. For 20 years, Sisera's chariots have enforced that control over Israel specifically. Villages along the main roads have emptied out. Travelers move by back paths instead of the routes their families used for generations, because the main roads now belong to men who ride them in chariots. If this Israelite force fails here, that arrangement does not end. It becomes permanent. The problem is that the Israelite side is already fighting from a position with almost nothing in its favor. They have no chariots of their own. Ironworking belongs to the Canaanite cities, not to the shepherds and farmers gathering at Kadesh. Among the thousands mustering for this campaign, a metal shield or a metal spear is rare enough to be remembered later as one of the defining facts of the whole war. The valley below Mount Tabor is flat, dry, and open, the exact terrain where chariots dominate and unarmored infantry dies quickly, and this is not a standing army answering to one commander. It is a coalition of separate tribes with separate leaders, and, as the muster is about to show, very different levels of commitment. Deborah holds court under a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, settling disputes for the tribes of Israel. She has already sent word north for Barak. Both of them are relying on a claim that has not yet been tested. That ground and weather will decide this fight, not the two armies standing on it. By the end of this video, you will see exactly how that claim held up and how mud accomplished what 10,000 poorly armed men could not have managed alone. A messenger climbs north out of the hill country toward Kadesh, in the territory of Naphtali. Barak, son of Abinoam, is wanted at the palm tree between Ramah and Bethel. He makes the journey south. Deborah is waiting, and she speaks before he can ask why he was summoned. The God of Israel commands this, she says. Gather 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun, and take them up to Mount Tabor. Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, will bring his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River to meet you. There, he will be placed in your hands. Barak does not answer right away. He is looking at a woman giving him an order to face 900 chariots with farmers and shepherds. I will go, he finally says, only if you come with me. If you stay behind, so do I. It is not an unreasonable condition. Deborah is already respected across the tribes as a prophetess and a judge. Her presence might hold a fragile coalition together in a way Barak alone cannot guarantee. She agrees. Then she adds a warning of her own. I will come, but know what that means for you. The honor of this campaign will not belong to Barak. Before this is finished, the Lord will hand Sisera to a woman instead. Barak says nothing in response. There is no woman anywhere in the plan as he currently understands it. The name that prophecy points to has not entered the story yet. Word goes out from Kadesh. The campaign begins. Messengers carry the summons through the hill country. Farmers put down their tools. Shepherds leave their flocks in the care of sons too young to fight. Within days, men are moving toward Kadesh from across Naphtali and Zebulun on foot, carrying whatever weapons a population with no ironworkers of its own has managed to produce. The shortage is severe enough to become one of the details remembered longest about this war. Among thousands of men preparing to fight 900 chariots, a proper shield or a metal-tipped spear is a rare sight. Most of what the tribes bring to Kadesh is farming tools reshaped for combat, or nothing beyond a willingness to show up at all, and significant numbers do show up. Alongside Zebulun and Naphtali, fighters arrive from Ephraim, from Benjamin, from the western half of Manasseh, from Issachar. 10,000 men gather in total, more than Barak or Deborah could have guaranteed a month earlier. 4 tribes send no one. Reuben debates joining for so long that the debate itself becomes the tribe's entire contribution to the war. East of the Jordan, Gilead stays exactly where it is. Dan remains occupied with ships and coastal trade, treating the war in the north as somebody else's problem. Asher stays along the shore as well, close enough to have helped, far enough to avoid any of the consequences of getting involved. One absence outlasts all the others in memory. A town called Miraz sends no one at all, not even a token force, despite apparently being close enough that help was expected. That specific refusal survives by name in the victory song composed after the campaign, in a single line cursing Miraz for staying home while the rest of the coalition marched. By the time the muster finishes, 10,000 men stand ready to face 900 chariots. The coalition is real. It is also, from its very first roll call, incomplete, held together by conviction rather than by command, with no way to force the missing tribes to appear, and no guarantee the ones who did will hold together once the fighting actually starts. Deborah and Barak lead the assembled force from Kadesh toward Mount Tabor. Reports reach Sisera at Harosheth Hagoyim within days. An Israelite force is gathering at Kadesh, and its destination is Mount Tabor. He does not wait to find out what it means. Sisera calls in his full strength, 900 chariots fitted with iron, and every soldier under his command, and marches them east along the line of the Kishon River toward the mountain. For a commander who has enforced Canaanite rule over this region for 20 years without serious resistance, 10,000 poorly armed tribesmen gathering on high ground looks less like a threat and more like a chance to end the resistance permanently. Each chariot in that column is a light, two-wheeled platform built for speed on hard, flat ground, carrying a driver and usually a second man armed with a bow. On the packed earth of the valley floor, a force this size can outrun and outmaneuver infantry with almost no effort. It is the same advantage that has let a comparatively small number of chariots control a much larger population for 2 decades. For days, the Canaanite column grows on the plain below Tabor. Chariot after chariot rolls into position, wheels cutting fresh lines into dry ground, horses raising dust visible from the Israelite camp on the height above. No one on the Israelite side has stood this close to a force this size before. From the ridge, the calculation facing Deborah and Barak is simple and unfavorable. The tribes hold higher ground for now. But water is limited on the mountain, and an army cannot wait indefinitely for an enemy who controls the open valley and every route in and out of it. Each day spent watching the chariots assemble works against the coalition, not for it. Then, late in the standoff, the weather turns. Clouds build over the ridge from the west, thickening through the afternoon. The wind shifts and picks up speed. On the valley floor, Sisera's officers take little notice of any of it. Chariots have never had reason to fear rain before. 900 of them are lined up on ground that has supported Canaanite armies without failure for as long as anyone in the camp can remember. What none of them account for is the specific ground they have chosen. The soil of the Jezreel Valley carries a high concentration of clay and volcanic material that, once soaked, holds water instead of draining it, turning firm earth into standing mud within a short span of time. It is a detail with no effect during a dry season and a decisive effect the moment a storm breaks over ground already prepared to trap anything heavy that tries to cross it. Deborah studies the darkening sky over the valley, then turns to Barak. "Now," she says, "rise and move. Today the Lord hands you Sisera. He is already marching out ahead of you." Barak looks once more at the chariot line stretched across the plain below. 900 vehicles positioned and ready, exactly the kind of force that has broken every previous resistance in the region. Then he gives the order. 10,000 men start down the slope of Mount Tabor, off the high ground that has protected them for days, and onto open plain, moving straight toward the chariots waiting below. There is no second position to retreat to if this goes wrong. Once the descent begins, the coalition is committed to finishing what it started at Kadesh. The Israelite line moves down the slope quickly, closing the distance before the chariots below can build up the speed that makes them dangerous in open country. For these first minutes, everything depends on timing. If Sisera's charioteers reach the Israelite line at full speed on dry ground, the descent from Tabor ends badly for everyone making it. Then the storm breaks over the valley. Rain drives down in heavy sheets, the kind that turns dry ground to mud within minutes rather than hours. The packed earth that has supported Sisera's chariots for days starts giving way underneath them. Wheels that were cutting clean lines into dry ground begin cutting trenches instead. Within a short span of time, they stop cutting anything at all. One chariot sinks to the axle, then a second. Then the pattern repeats along the length of the Canaanite line. Drivers whip their horses forward, and the horses go nowhere, hooves working against ground that no longer offers anything solid to push against. The force built specifically to move faster than any foot soldier on the field is now moving slower than the infantry it was meant to outrun. Behind the stalled chariots, the Kishon River, swollen by the same storm, rises out of its banks and spreads across the low ground, cutting off the exact retreat routes that were dry and passable an hour earlier. Barak's men reach the chariot line while it is still trying to free itself from the mud. What follows stops being an organized battle almost immediately. It becomes a collapse. Canaanite soldiers abandon vehicles they cannot move and try to escape on foot through the same mud that trapped the wheels. Discovering it slows a running man almost as effectively as it stopped a chariot. Some are caught directly between the rising river and the advancing Israelite line, with no direction left that offers a way out. Officers shout orders that cannot be heard over rain, rushing water, and the collapse of a formation that took days to assemble and is now falling apart within minutes. Near Tanakh, close to the springs that feed toward Megiddo, small groups of Canaanite fighters try to make a stand and are cut down or scattered along with everyone else. Sisera himself climbs down from his own chariot and runs. This single detail marks how completely the situation has reversed. The commander whose entire military identity was built around the chariot, who has spent 20 years enforcing Canaanite rule from behind a driver and a bow, is now on foot in the mud, indistinguishable from the infantry he has spent 2 decades defeating with ease. Barak does not stop the pursuit at the valley floor. He drives it all the way back to Harosheth Hagoyim, the same fortified base Sisera marched his troops out of only days earlier. Every Canaanite soldier who does not escape immediately is killed somewhere along that route. By the time the pursuit ends, the army that controlled the region for 20 years through 900 chariots of iron no longer exists as a fighting force. Sisera is not among the bodies left on the field or along the road to Harosheth Hagoyim. Somewhere in the confusion of the retreat, he has broken away from his own collapsing army entirely, running alone in a direction none of his surviving officers are taking. While the pursuit tears through the valley and up the road toward Harosheth Hagoyim, Sisera reaches a cluster of tents belonging to a different people altogether. The Canaanites are metal workers, not soldiers, with no formal stake in the war between Israel and Hazor. Their leader in this camp, a man named Heber, has kept a separate peace with King Jabin for years, apart from the rest of his own people. It is exactly the kind of camp a defeated commander running without an escort might reasonably expect to find shelter in. A woman steps out to meet him before he even has to ask for anything. Heber's wife, Jael. "Come in," she tells him. "Don't be afraid." He follows her inside. She covers him with a blanket, hiding him completely from anyone who might pass by outside and glance in. He asks her for water. He has been moving on foot since the rain broke, in armor built for riding, not for running across flooded ground. She brings him milk instead, served in a bowl normally set aside for guests of considerably higher standing than a commander hiding under a blanket in someone else's tent. Before he allows himself to sleep, Sisera gives Jael one final instruction. If anyone comes to the tent asking whether a man is inside, she is to say no. Exhausted past the point of caution, having lost an entire army in the space of an afternoon, he falls asleep almost immediately. Jael waits. No surviving account records exactly what she is thinking in these minutes. What is recorded is what she does next. She picks up a tent peg and a hammer, tools used every day to secure her own household, and crosses the floor of the tent without waking him. In one motion, she drives the peg through his temple, pinning him to the ground he is sleeping on. He does not wake. He does not move again. Outside, the pursuit that began on the valley floor continues working its way through the countryside, tracking down what remains of the Canaanite force. Barak, following the last scattered groups north, eventually reaches the same camp Sisera ran to. Jael meets him before he has to ask anything. "Come with me," she says. "I'll show you who you're after." Inside the tent, Barak finds Sisera exactly where he fell, the commander of 900 chariots, the man who spent 20 years enforcing Canaanite rule over the region from a moving platform built for speed, killed instead on a stationary tent floor by a woman with no army behind her at all. Deborah's warning to Barak, delivered days earlier under a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel, has come true in the most literal way it could. News of Sisera's death and the destruction of his army spreads through Hazor and every town that has answered to Jabin for the past 20 years. The force that enforced his rule is gone in a single afternoon, defeated less by Israelite weapons than by rain, mud, and one act carried out with a hammer no soldier on either side expected. Jabin's authority over the region does not collapse the moment the news arrives, but it does not recover either. In the years that follow, Israelite pressure on his remaining territory only continues to build until the kingdom that once fielded 900 iron chariots stops functioning as a threat to anyone. Deborah and Barak compose a song to mark the victory, later recorded as the 5th chapter of the book of Judges. Many scholars who study the development of Hebrew language and poetry consider it one of the oldest surviving pieces of text in the entire Hebrew Bible. Its vocabulary and grammar are distinct enough from later biblical Hebrew that a number of researchers date its core close to the events it describes, somewhere in the 12th or 11th century BCE, centuries before Israel had a king of its own. Other scholars argue for a considerably later date of composition, and the exact age of the poem remains an open question in the field. What draws far less disagreement is the setting the song describes. A period when fortified Canaanite cities such as Hazor commanded exactly the kind of chariot forces that a loose alliance of highland tribes had no other way of matching. Hazor itself was, at this point in its history, among the largest cities anywhere in Canaan, with a fortified upper city and a much larger lower city spreading out beneath it. Archaeological excavation confirms a city of considerable wealth and military reach during this general period, and confirms that it met a violent end at some point around the close of the Bronze Age. Exactly who was responsible for that destruction, and precisely how it lines up with the Sisera campaign, remains debated among archaeologists, with candidates ranging from Egyptian campaigns to the wider collapse of Bronze Age states across the eastern Mediterranean during this same general era, to the Israelites themselves. The written account and the archaeological record describe the same broad picture: a dominant chariot-based power that no longer controls the region, even where they do not agree on every specific detail. The era itself was already moving away from chariot warfare as the deciding factor in regional conflicts well beyond this one valley, as the wider system of Bronze Age states that depended on large chariot forces began breaking down across the eastern Mediterranean around this same period. The detail of 900 chariots specifically described as iron has drawn its own share of scholarly attention. The period in question sits right at the start of what is conventionally labeled the Iron Age in this part of the world, when iron technology was spreading through the region, but had not yet fully replaced bronze in most uses. Some historians read the description as consistent with a transitional period in which iron fittings and iron weapons were becoming available to wealthier military powers like Hazor, well before they became common everywhere else. Others argue that fully iron chariots remain unlikely on technical grounds for this specific period, and that the description may reflect how later generations remembered the era's most feared weapon rather than an exact inventory of materials. Either way, the core claim behind the phrase is not really about metallurgy. It is about a technological gap between one side that could field organized chariot forces and one side that, by its own account, could barely find a metal spear among 10,000 men. The song composed after the battle ends on a detail that has nothing to do with chariots, rivers, or mud. Far from the valley, in a window somewhere in Hazor, Sisera's mother watches the road, waiting for her son's chariot to come into view. Her attendants reassure her that the men have simply been delayed, busy dividing the spoils of what they still assume was an easy victory. Neither woman yet knows that no chariot is coming back, and that the son they are waiting for has already been dead for some time, in a tent, a considerable distance from any battlefield. Hazor continues as an important city in the region for a period afterward. But the specific power Sisera commanded on the day he marched 900 chariots to the banks of the Kishon River never returns to full strength. A storm, a flooded riverbed, and a single tent peg had already settled that outcome before most of the fighting on the valley floor had even finished. Deborah's song would not be the last time Israel faced an enemy that seemed impossible to beat in open ground. It would not even be the last time something no army could control decided the outcome.